This passage was on a Gallup poll conducted to find out which country is considered to be the greatest threat to world peace. And according to the passage, the United States, was the champion. After that, there were a few comments. It was a relatively easy passage to read. A couple of questions required a little time to solve. Let's quickly summarize the passage. As the year 2013 drew to an end, the BBC reported on the results of the Win Gallup International poll on the question, which country do you think is the greatest threat to the peace in the world today? The US was the champion by a substantial margin, winning 3 times the votes of second place Pakistan. US won hands down. It got 3 times the votes to the second placed country, that is Pakistan. In some parts of the world, the US is perceived as a menace to world peace, notably in the Middle East, where overwhelming majorities regard the US and its close ally Israel as the major threats they face, not the US Israeli favorite Iran. So in the Middle East, people perceive the United States as a threat to peace, United States and its ally Israel as the greatest threat to peace, unlike the US. According to the US, Israel, Iran is the greatest threat to world peace. But most of the Middle East views US and Israel as the greatest threat to world peace. Few Latin Americans are likely to question the judgment of Cuban nationalist hero Jose Marti, who wrote in 1894 that the further they draw away from the United States, the freer and more prosperous the Latin American people will be. This is what he said in 1894. There's also a joke about some Mexican president, not a joke, he actually wrote it, saying, my poor country Mexico, so close to the United States and so far from God. So US, the neighbors of US and Latin American countries are not very happy with the US. So here you have a Latin American, a Cuban nationalist who says that the further the Latin American countries are from the United States, the freer and more prosperous the people will be. Marty's judgment has been confirmed in recent years, once again by an analysis of poverty by the UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean released last month. Now here's an interesting fact. The UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean did an analysis of the poverty in Latin American countries, and its report seems to align with Marty's judgment. What does its report show? Far-reaching reforms have sharply reduced poverty in Brazil, Uruguay, Venezuela, and some other countries where the US influence is slight. These countries where the influence of the United States is little, hardly any, there have been far-reaching reforms and they have reduced poverty significantly. But it remains abysmal, means distressingly low in others, namely those that have long been under US domination like Guatemala and Honduras. Even in relatively wealthy Mexico, under the umbrella of the North American Free Trade Agreements, poverty is severe, with 1 million added to the numbers of the poor in 2013. So basically, countries which have had little influence of the United States, where United States has had little influence, Latin American countries have done better, according to a UN analysis of poverty. And countries which have been under US domination have shown higher poverty. Sometimes the reasons for the world's concerns are obliquely recognized in the United States. He said they are indirectly, obliquely means indirectly recognized in the United States. Even some people in the United States agree with this, the world's worry about the United States as a threat to peace. Former CIA Director Michael Hayden, discussing Obama's drone murder campaign, conceded that right now there isn't a government on the planet that agrees with our legal rationale for these operations except for Afghanistan and maybe Israel. So there are very few countries in the world who agree with the logic behind our policies for the operations like the Obama drone murder campaign. Nobody sees the logic behind it except two countries that he named, Afghanistan and Israel. At that time, Afghanistan was US forces were in Afghanistan. And Israel, of course, is America's closest ally. A normal country would be concerned by how it is viewed in the world. Well, you don't want to be the most unpopular country in the world. You don't want the world to see you as a threat to peace. A normal country would be concerned about how it is viewed in the world. Certainly, it would be true of a country committed to a decent respect of the opinions of mankind, to quote the founding fathers. You want some decent respect of others' opinion about you. But the United States is far from a normal country. A normal country would be bothered by having a bad name in the world. But the United States is not a normal country. It has had the most powerful economy in the world for a century. It has had no real challenge to its global hegemony since World War II domination, despite some decline, partly self-administered. So it was the world's greatest economy for a long time. It is the world's most dominating country since World War II. The US, conscious of soft power, undertakes major campaigns of public diplomacy or propaganda to create a favorable image, sometimes accompanied by worthwhile policies that are welcome. So sometimes it tries to build its image by having these propaganda campaigns. But when the world persists in believing that the US is by far the greatest threat to peace, the American press scarcely reports the fact. The press does not even mention it. The ability to ignore unwanted facts is one of the prerogatives of unchallenged power. So the facts are that US is perceived as a threat, but the press ignores it. This ability to ignore unwanted facts is a privilege, a prerogative, a right almost, a special right that a powerful country has. And in the US, according to the author, unchallenged power. So that is something that comes automatically with unchallenged power. Closely related is the right to radically revise history. Along with this, I'll ignore those facts which are against me. Along with this, there's another fact that when you have unchallenged power, you also get the right to radically revise history. What was there, you change it. You write other things. A current example can be seen in the laments about the escalating Sunni-Shiite conflict that is tearing apart the Middle East, particularly in Iraq and Syria. So he gives the example, the Sunni-Shia rift, particularly in Iraq and Syria. The prevailing theme of the US commentary is that this strife is a terrible consequence of the withdrawal of American forces from the region. Why is strife there? According to the United States, it's because of the withdrawal of US forces from these regions. A lesson in the dangers of isolationism. The opposite is more nearly correct, but the opposite of that is correct. The roots of the conflicts within Islam are many and varied, but it cannot be seriously denied that the split was significantly exacerbated by the American and British-led invasion of Iraq. Yes, the roots of this conflict between the two sects of Islam go way back in history, but they were worsened by the America-British-led invasion of Iraq. Which of the following does the author believe to be true about the cause of the conflict in the Middle East? What he means, the conflict between the sects in the Middle East. The cause is the unwillingness of the US to accept any form of criticism of its policies. This is about US. It's talking about the conflict between the Shias and Sunnis in the Middle East. The cause is the withdrawal of the US forces from that region, which is a lesson of the perils of isolationism. This is the US version, that the cause of this conflict is the US withdrawal of forces from Iraq. But the author says that's not true. Therefore, B cannot be the answer. The author B says that the US says that's the cause, but the author says that's not true. So B is not the right answer. There are many causes of this conflict, but the US has nothing to do with them. This part is correct, but not this. There are multiple causes, the author agrees, but the US-British-led invasion exacerbated it, means worsened it. Therefore, answer is D.